have always fed their families are trying to get food to feed their kids. For the first time, people who never worried about paying the mortgage or paying the rent are worried they're going to be kicked out of their homes. For the first time, we have a health care crisis that every one of us is afraid that we might come down with an illness that we still don't understand. We need big, bold action. And yet, Leader McConnell seems totally divorced from that reality. Americans can't afford to wait for Leader McConnell to finally realize the devastation that so many Americans are experiencing. How many unemployed Americans would it take for Leader McConnell to say he feels urgency and a need to act? How many hungry people would it take? So the bottom line is very simple. We need to act in a big and bold way. The House has started the ball rolling. The Republicans and the President ought to understand that and help us move in a big, bold way, not stand in the way. On Fauci, I just hope that the President listens to Fauci. The President is in such an ironic position. He's desperate that we get back to work and that we resume normality, and he refuses to enact the best way to make that happen, ample testing, so that people know when they have the virus and when they don't, so that people are not afraid to go to the stores. I read that in Georgia, something between 86 and 92% of the people didn't show up in the stores once they opened because they're afraid. The answer is testing, and this president is just so out of date. Fauci said, he warned that suffering and death could be avoided if we don't follow science. President Trump, listen to Dr. Fauci. Follow science, not your ego. Get this done, and we'll all be better off. Debbie.
Well, let me first join with Senator Schumer in congratulating the House for moving in a bold way and putting people first. And that's what needs to be done, and I hope that Senator McConnell will be listening to the people in his home state, the families, the seniors, those who are in desperate need of support because of a situation that they didn't cause themselves, but they are now looking for all of us as a country, as a government, to step up and support them. There are over 4.2 million COVID-19 cases globally right now, 4.2 million. And the United States has over 1.35 million of those. So think about that. So we have over 30% of the cases of COVID-19, and we're just a little bit over 4% of the world's population. We have more confirmed cases than the total of the next 6 states: Spain, UK, Russia, Italy, France, and Germany. So what happened? What happened? First, let me say we did a study through our policy committee that concluded back on April 15th, and in fact, the numbers are even more staggering today, but taking a look at what happened and looking at other countries. So here's what we know. You have heard this before. The fact is that South Korea and the United States had their first diagnosed test of COVID-19 on the same day, January 20th. 8 weeks later, the United States was testing 125 people per million, and South Korea was testing 5,000 people per million, so 40 times more than we were. This failure left us where we are today. When we finished this report on April 14th with numbers, there were 10,000 cases in South Korea, and at that time, over 600,000 in the United States. We have a situation now, as we know, where more than 80,000 Americans have died from COVID-19. 80,000. In South Korea, 258 people. 258 people have died. So we have been pushing and pushing and pushing for a national testing strategy that includes significantly expanding testing, expanding reporting, bolstering the supply chain. We fought for investments in research on long-term solutions like vaccines and treatments and antibody tests. We have pushed and pushed and pushed, and we successfully made it a priority in the last package that passed to include $25 billion for research, manufacturing, and administering of COVID-19 tests, as well as the infrastructure implementation for contact tracing and laboratory capacity expansion. Most importantly, and this will be very telling, because that language that we successfully achieved requires that the administration produce a national strategic testing policy that will focus on actually increasing domestic capacity, including testing supplies. And on May 5th, we sent a letter indicating that the president needs to make sure it has details and that it has numbers. So the bottom line is this for us. The truth of the matter is, despite what the president says right now about testing and his press conference applauding everything that's been done on testing, bottom line is this. It is still not true that every American who wants a test can get a test. It is not true that every American who wants a test can get a test. And secondly, more than 80,000 Americans have died. Moms and dads and brothers and sisters and grandpas and grandmas. And many of those deaths could have been prevented if the White House had taken this pandemic seriously and had acted quickly in January to do comprehensive testing that was needed, and that testing is still needed today.
Thank you, Deb. Just 2 points I didn't make. One, on the inaction in the Senate. If you didn't know, if you came from a different planet and looked at the Senate this week, you wouldn't even know there's a crisis in America. That's how lame the Republican response to the Senate is. Nothing going on the floor on COVID, and not close to the number of hearings we need. Second, as you know, in our law, the president is required to give a detailed plan on testing on May 24th. Today, Admiral, I got to say his name right, Admiral Girwar said that we need 1 million tests a day in the fall. Well, give us a detailed plan on May 24th as to how we're going to get there. Because Donald Trump said 2 months ago we have all the testing we need, and we don't. Questions? Yes.
Andrew Politico. Can I ask you what your expectations are for the FISA debate tomorrow? And on a separate matter, do you believe Tara Reade's allegations against Joe Biden?
Okay. First, the bottom line is that there's a lot of support in our caucus for the amendments. We'll see. We don't know where the Republican votes are. But I think there is support in our amendments, a lot of support for the amendments. We don't know how it's going to come out. Look, before the Me Too movement, women were not listened to who were telling what had happened to them. Since Me Too, women are listened to. Now, I've heard Joe Biden's explanation. I think it's sufficient. I think he will be a great candidate. I think he will be a great president, and I think he'll help us take back the Senate.
Mr. Leader, you sort of asked rhetorically, what will it take to get Republicans to pay attention to this crisis? Let me just ask you, what do you think it will actually take?
Public pressure.
What will bring them to the table?
Well, let me say this. This is redux. This is almost the third time we have this situation. On the first COVID bill, on the big COVID bill, COVID 3, McConnell didn't want to do lots of things. Public pressure, and the pressure from his own senators forced him to do it. On COVID 3.5 again, they were not going to modify the program. Public pressure forced him to do it. Public pressure, the overwhelming needs of the American people waiting for hours online to go to food banks, to feed their families when they never had to go before. That's what's going to do it. McConnell will feel the pressure from the American people. The more he looks like Herbert Hoover, the more difficult his position becomes, and he's looking a lot like Herbert Hoover these days.
Yeah, Senator.
So does Donald Trump look like Herbert Hoover by ignoring the problem, saying we've had victory, saying it's a hoax, saying we want to slow down in what we do.
Senator McConnell's main ask seems to be the liability waivers for businesses, and I was wondering, where does your caucus come down on this, and could you see this being the trade-off that could get you some of those
Leader
proposals?
McConnell, we have people starving. We have people being kicked out of their homes, and he's worried about a big businessman being sued because he's let one of his workers be susceptible to COVID? Come on. Stop the ideological issues. We have a huge, huge problem in America, and McConnell is focusing on something that is a barrier to getting things done. Yes.
Sir, there was a coronavirus scare at the White House last week that was picked up by these Abbott rapid tests. Speaker Pelosi and Leader McConnell rejected HHS's offer for these machines. Should Congress reconsider accepting them for the sake of
Look, the bottom line is Donald Trump says what's good for the White House is good for America. If every person who enters the White House should be tested because they're worried about COVID, every American should be able to be tested. Any store owner should have enough tests so he can assure his customers that they can walk in. Any business should have enough tests. What's good enough for the White House should be good enough for America. There shouldn't be a bifurcated standard, in my opinion. And we don't have testing in large parts of America. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Good job, Jeff.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you. See you later.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you later.
Wow, that dude's really taking it serious.